Good afternoon, everyone. If we'll come to order in the room, it is December 5th, 1 p.m. I'm officially calling this Durham City Council work session to order. His Honor is absent today. He's attending a meeting on city business in Wilmington. I'll be joining him after this meeting, actually. So we will carry forward in his absence, and we wish him well. Let me say good afternoon to all of my honorable colleagues, those of you in room with us today, and those of you watching on whatever platform you may be watching us on. Let's get to work. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Sure. Mayor Williams is on leave today, so Mayor Pro Tem Middleton is presiding.
I'm here.
Thank you. Councilmember Baker?
Here.
Councilmember Caballero?
Here.
Councilmember Cook?
Here.
Councilmember Freeman?
Present.
Councilmember Rist?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Clerk. Friends, at this time, I'm going to yield to my honorable colleagues for any announcements they may have today. I'll start at the end to my left. Councilmember Cook, good afternoon. I'm sorry. Councilmember Baker. Councilmember Caballero, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I just wanted to shout out our budget staff. Over the fall, they held a series of community conversations, and leading up to the budget conversation, I was able to attend, I think, one of the last ones at El Futuro, which was done fully in Spanish. It was extremely well attended. I feel like there were over 40 residents there, and I just really want to shout out Director Reardon and her team. I know that that's a big lift for y'all, and so I think that the community is responding really well, and I know that they were well attended throughout the fall. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Freeman, good afternoon. Councilmember Ritz, good afternoon.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Good evening. Good afternoon, everyone. I have one item, and that is that I think in the manager's priority memo for the last council meeting, there was a memo that provided an update on this is the bow hunting issue. Additional research that I think Attorney Miles had done to address some of the questions that Councilmember Cook raised. So we have the information. The city manager, I think in the priority memo, said it's up to us to put that on the agenda or not. I'd like to get my colleagues' support to just put that on our next either the next one or the council meeting after that. This is not to say I don't know how I'm going to vote on the matter. I don't have a preference either way. I do think in the spirit of efficient and responsive government, I think we owe them an up or down vote. So I'd move to put it on the next council. This is the bow hunting issue.
I would second that. I appreciate you bringing that because I had asked that question when I thought it was coming back on. So I'm glad that you raised it. Yeah. I would second that, to have it put on the next work session agenda.
Well, let me, we're not entertaining the motions. This is a work session. So we will, and this is announcements during this time. So we will, under other matters at the end of the meeting, we can take it up then, but this is a work session.
Okay. I thought we, in the comments, could also ask to put items on an agenda.
That's what I heard you use the word move.
Well, whatever the process would be to put it on the agenda. I mean,
so we're going to deal with, we're going to deal with that other matters. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. But during work sessions, we don't, unless we suspend the rules, we don't take votes during work session. So, Councilman Caballero.
We can deal with it at the end because it's about that issue.
Okay. All right. Thank you for bringing that up, Councilmember Baker or Councilmember Cook. All right. Councilmember Baker, did you have any? All right. Thank you, colleagues. I don't have any announcements, but just a bit of a teaser, something a little celebratory for us as a city. This year, the song Change is Going to Come by Sam Cooke is turning 60 years old. That song was actually written in Durham while Sam Cooke was here. The death of his anniversary is coming up in December, and also the anniversary of that song. And it was billed as an anthem for the civil rights movement. We're a city that's progressive and always on the cusp of change for our country, so I think it's a feather in our cap. So just want to tease, we are going to be having a proclamation, a celebratory proclamation marking not only Sam Cooke's death, but the place of Durham in music history, since the lyrics of that song were first. I had thought about singing a little bit, but I'm not gonna do that. But that famous first line is "I was born by the river." So y'all Google it if you want, look it up on YouTube. But that song was written in our city, and we will be celebrating our place in history at a forthcoming meeting. So just wanted to put that out there as a little lighthearted celebration with all that's going on. That's it with respect to announcements. At this time, I'm going to yield to the city manager for any priority items she may have.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, members of the Durham City Council. I do have a few priority items for you this afternoon. Agenda item number 18, the third amendment to contract for Durham Freeway Community Engagement Services with Idealisms LLC. This item is being referred back to the Transportation Department. Agenda item number 22, Citizens Matters. Jacqueline Jacobs canceled her request to speak. And in agenda item number 23, a Citizens Matter, Margaret Chapman. There is a response from the Transportation Department that has been added to your agenda today in background for Margaret Chapman's item. So that is all I have for you as priority items this afternoon.
Thank you, Madam Manager. I'll now yield to the City Attorney for any priority items she may have. Good afternoon, Councilor.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem. The City Attorney's Office has no priority items this afternoon.
Thank you so much. I'll now yield to our City Clerk for any priority items she may have. Good afternoon, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem and City Council members. I wanted to go over the Board, Committee, and Commission report. The Mayor's Hispanic Latino Committee appointments. You have nominated Junior A. Sarmiento and Orly Spots to the committee. And then for the Durham Planning Commission appointment, you have nominated Marlena Byrne. And that's the end of my report.
Thank you so much for that.
Mayor Pro Tem,
Yes, ma'am.
are you going to entertain a motion to accept the manager's priority
I will
items?
now. I'll entertain a motion to accept the manager's priority items.
So moved.
Second.
I've heard a motion in a second. All in favor?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Manager Page, I heard you say that item 18 and then you responded, you were referring to one certain part of item 18 being referred back or the whole item that's been referred back?
The whole item.
The whole item 18.
Number 18.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other questions? All right, we have a motion and a proper second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, the manager's item is received. Thank you. I'm sorry, Councilman Caballero.
Sorry, and I forgot to say this during announcements. I will be leaving by 2:30 or 3 p.m. at our next work session. So I don't need an excused absence, but I do want to let my colleagues know I'll have to leave early that day. Thank you.
All right, at this time, I'm going to turn to our administrative consent items, which I'll read for the record. Administrative consent items are things that we can vote on with one fell swoop, but any member of the council or of the public can pull any one of these items for comment. Starting with City Clerk's office, item number 1, Mayor's Hispanic Latino Committee appointments. Item number 2, Durham Planning Commission appointment. Item number 3, amendment to Master Services Agreement with Paymentus Corporation for electronic bill payment services. Item number 4, 2024 General Obligation Bond Referendum, and I believe that item is pulled. We have a member of the public be speaking on that. Item number 5, North Carolina State Term Contract Hybrid Police Patrol SUVs.
Oh, yeah, pull this one.
All right, item number 5 is pulled. Item number 6, North Carolina State Term Contract Police Vehicle Upfitting. Item number 7, Cooperative Group Purchase Contract Shuttle Buses. Under General Services Department, item number 8, Merrickmore Park Amenity Upgrades Design Contract with WNS of North Carolina, PC. Item number,
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, I don't want to pull it, just want to say, great stuff. So excited about that. At the entrance of the park, so I'm really excited about what's developing there with Merrickmore Park.
absolutely, Councilman Rod, concur. Item number 9, First Amendment to the contract with Oracle Elevator Holdco, Inc. for elevator maintenance and repair services. Item number 10, agreement to fund Durham Symphony Incorporated for the 2024-2025 Durham Symphony Season Incorporated. Item number 11, contract for cultural planning services between the City of Durham and MJR Partners, LLC. Item number 12, First Amendment to the 2022 Durham Cultural Roadmap Development Interlocal Cooperation Agreement. Under the Human Resources Department, item number 13, amendments to City of Durham Police and Fire Compensation Plans.
Oh, yeah.
All right, item 13 is pulled. Under Neighborhood Improvement Services, item number 14, contract between Hayti Promise Community Development Corporation, City of Durham, and Rebuilding Together of the Triangle for Fayetteville Street Corridor Neighborhood Stabilization Partnership Implementation. Item number 14 is pulled. Under Technology Solutions Department, item number 15, contract with Penn Link Limited for Tangle's open source intelligence software as a service platform for Durham Police Department. Item number 16, Second Amendment to the scope of services between Duke University and the City of Durham.
Like to pull
Pull that one.
17 is pulled. Item number, was it 16? My bad. Yeah, 16. All right, under Transportation Department, item number 17, Federal Transit Administration compliance updates. Item number 18, Third Amendment to contract for Durham Freeway Community Engagement Services with Idealisms LLC. That item's been referred back. Item number 19, First Amendment to Supplemental Agreement number 3 with WSP USA Inc. for on-call professional services for Durham Freeway Study. I'm
Pull that one.
okay. Item number 20, FY 2024 through 2025 Transit Capital Improvement Plan, CIP Budget Ordinance Amendment.
Pull that one.
It's 20 is pulled. And under public hearings that we will entertain at our Monday meeting, City County Planning Department, item number 21, street renaming of Vivian Street. And then citizen matters to be heard at 1. Item number 22, Jacqueline Jacobs will not be here. Item number 23, Margaret Chapman. And I have a card, I believe, for a speaker, Kedra Campbell. And Chris, it looks like Chris Perlstein. Okay. All right, colleagues, that ends the reading of the agenda as published. At this time, I will turn now to our public comments to be heard at 1 p.m. And we will start with Margaret Chapman, who I believe is online. If we can make her hearable, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon. Thank you for being with us. You'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you so much. Thank you for giving me time to speak on behalf of the Trinity Park Neighborhood Association's Transportation Committee. I want to also thank the Transportation Department and Sean Egan for responding to our inquiries. As you may be aware, on October 30th, a school bus driven down Gregson Street hit an SUV, and the bus also hit 2 houses. After hitting a house facing Gregson, the bus crossed the street and came to rest in the back of a house facing Urban Street. This is at least the 4th time in recent years that collisions at intersections on Gregson have led to vehicles crashing into people's homes. Again, I want to thank the Transportation Department and the Council for pursuing any and all possible remedies for this, including an upcoming feasibility study on converting Gregson and Duke into 2-way streets and putting an additional stoplight at Knox and Gregson. We think additional measures are warranted, including additional lights. However, we are concerned that in the time it will take to implement 2-way conversion and or finally get an additional stoplight, more collisions will occur, putting more neighbors in danger. I don't think you all understand how dangerous it feels living next to a street where cars routinely drive off the road and into houses. Because we've seen the discussions around 2-way conversions dragging on for many years, the Neighborhood Association would also like to put forward the idea of a road diet or reducing Gregson and Duke to 1 lane with turn lanes and bus pullover lanes, which would be cheaper and take less repaving than doing a full 2-way conversion and would not require additional lights, but would also slow traffic. In fact, slowing traffic is the only way to prevent these accidents, and we are very concerned that the State Department of Transportation is not interested in slowing traffic at all. So we're excited for the possibilities for the future. We are concerned they're taking too long. And in the meantime, we have a question for you. We would like to know, what can we as neighbors over the next year or so, before any official changes are implemented, do to keep ourselves safe and to keep cars out of our houses? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. Next, Kedra Campbell. Is Kedra here with us? I have a note that says that she may not appear. Is she on? Okay.
No, I'm sorry.
Jacqueline's not appearing. Kedra Campbell? Madam Clerk, do we have anyone by that name in queue virtually? All right. Moving on, we'll now welcome Chris Perlstein. Good afternoon, sir. Thank you for being with us. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you.
City council members, you know, I normally like to come before you talking about Roxborough Street, and I would love to take this time to reiterate my concerns living on Roxborough. We have many of the same issues. I was also really hoping to spend a lot of time talking to you today about data I've gathered after the street has been repaved, but has not been addressed in terms of safety concerns. Punchline is it's gotten a lot worse. I'd also like to talk to you today about things that I have done to try to make things better on my own. So I, in the course of the data that I've gathered as part of the Reckless Roxborough project, have observed that one of the factors is vehicles parked in the parallel parking spots along Roxborough. And so what I decided to do is build a utility trailer. It has a plate. This is all legal, and park it permanently in one of the parking spots and measure the effect that that has. I put some plans on it, try to make it look nice. And this has been helpful in reducing speeds. And I can actually quantify how much it's done that. But unfortunately, I have other priority items to talk to you about. One of them was going to also be the safety issues in the American Tobacco Trail at the Fayetteville Street crossing. I've heard from a lot of neighbors and personally experienced safety issues due to encampments along the American Tobacco Trail, including sanitary issues and fires that have actually gotten out of control and burned down encampments. This has happened multiple times. And I've also heard from some of my neighbors who live in that area that this has been a significant problem and impacts them day to day. I'm also not talking about that today. What I actually want to talk about is the public school bus situation that's happening with the county. Obviously, this is a county issue. Hopefully, you all are aware of it. There's such a shortage that they are only busing, I think it's 80% of the routes currently. And come January, the intention is to actually increase the enforcement of like the concept of a walk zone or a family responsibility zone. I think the name's changing because obviously it's not safe to walk in a lot of the areas within that radius that they're trying to do, which I think is a mile and a half. So if I recall correctly, it's going to be something like 21 schools. They're going to start enforcing this and having children either walk to school or the families are going to have to figure out a solution other than busing. So what I'd like for you all to consider, and especially the Public Works and Transportation Department, is what can we do to facilitate that by January? And what can we do long-term to make this a viable option for our families and children moving forward? If we don't have busing available to these folks, they're going to have to walk or bike to school. And in a lot of these areas, we do not have crosswalks or streets are unsafe to cross due to speeds, sight lines, various other issues. And I think there's a lot of things we can do in the interim. We can paint every crosswalk in these zones. It doesn't have to be perfect. We can get out there with volunteers, just get something down. We can get flexi posts in to sort of narrow where those crosswalks are, slow cars down, make it more visible. I think we need to consider any and all actions we can do to address this if this policy comes to pass. And I think we have to think a lot about the tech that we have. This concept in the tech industry. Is that my time? Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us. There's another. No, just a poll. Yeah. All right, colleagues, thank you. That ends our public comments. I have, by my reckoning, Madam Manager, pulled items number 4, 5, 13, 14, 16, 19, and 20. You concur? Okay. All right, thank you much. We'll start with item number 4, and we do have a speaker, one of our neighbors, Thomas Crow Alberton, who has, hey, good afternoon. How are you, friend? Thank you for being with us. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, everybody. Oh, thank you. Firstly, I'd like to say, like many others, very excited to see park renovations at Longmeadow, East End, and Merrick Moore. East Durham deserves quality infrastructure and public spaces that we do not have right now. However, as it stands now, the city is not doing enough to combat the negative impact of development. Property taxes are estimated to go up by $34.60 for every $100,000 of property tax value to pay for these bonds. However, what's not included in that estimation is how much property value will go up due to new infrastructure nearby. This is what leads to gentrification. Since 2019, rent across Durham has risen by 31%, but wages have not kept up. When residents can no longer afford rent, cops and landlords work together to force them out. These evictions are an explicit form of racial violence, with here in Durham, Black residents are 4.78 times more likely to experience eviction than white tenants. Under this context, the number of unsheltered people here in Durham has increased by nearly 300% since 2016. That data point's from 2022. It is likely significantly higher than that today. Over this summer, City Council received a report saying that there is more than 400 unhoused people here in Durham. Anybody who works with unhoused people here in Durham will tell you that it is significantly higher and it is growing higher. Our unhoused neighbors are the first to suffer the brutal effects of gentrification. Just days after this bond referendum was approved, police began violently displacing East Durham residents at Long Meadow Park. On November 12th, Durham Police Department evicted dozens of people from encampments near and around the park, destroying most of their belongings. The only justification that was provided to people at the time was that the area was under investigation. This type of sweep is a common tactic to scatter people ahead of construction, and it is devastating for people experiencing homelessness. I've come to say that it doesn't have to be like this. There is another way. There are many ways we can go about this. We know prices are going to skyrocket because of both bonds, especially in East Durham. As a largely low-income neighborhood with a very large unhoused population, why is there no initiative from the city to combat the negative impacts? Again, we all want to see these new parks, but we know that there is a negative impact. Cost of living is going to go up. There are things that we can do. Last I checked on the annual financial report, there was an $18 million surplus of unassigned funds. We have the resources to take action.
Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being with us. Yeah. Councilman Big, did you pull this item?
I did also, yeah. Thanks.
Oh,
Mayor
I'm
Pro Tem.
sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't have
I want
any-
to thank the resident for the comment.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the comments. Certainly gentrification is an issue we need to be concerned about 24/7 with the city of Durham as we grow. I also just wanted to say, I'm so excited that more than 100,000 voters voted for each of those bonds in the last election. It's exciting, and I think it's exciting for Durham. I think we want nice things. We need to address the impacts, but I think having those bonds and the way we've done that with equity for the parks is really exciting. So thank you to the voters.
Thank you, Councilmember. Colleagues, anyone else? Councilmember Cook.
Yeah, we've talked about this a lot. I want to thank the speaker as well. And as a person who does work with folks who are housing insecure and actively unsheltered, he's totally correct in that we are underestimating those numbers, and that is, we can only do what is reported. There are more people that are unsheltered in this city than we know, and we can't even really deal with the people that we do know. And I also do work in eviction court every single day and see those statistics that we just talked about and the racial implication of those issues. I see that daily. So that is, we've talked about it. We've talked about it when we have looked at redoing several of our trails. We've looked at how to recapture the wealth that is generated from these infrastructure investments and make sure that it stays with the community that's there. So I just want to flag that. I do think that there are creative solutions there. This bond passing is only the first step, I think. And like my colleague said, this was something that went to a referenda, so it was voted on by the general population. But that doesn't absolve us from having to bear the responsibility for the consequences that we know are coming from this. So just want to echo what's been said here today and want us to really think critically. Once we see the impacts, it's too late to deal with them. Once people are being displaced, it's going to be too late. So we really need to be working on this issue right at the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Anyone else? All right.
I would just echo Councilmember Cook.
Thank you, Councilmember. All right, thank you, colleagues. Moving on to item number 5, Councilmember Baker will yield to you.
Yes, thank you. Just had a few questions on this one. I wanted to know broadly
Councilmember Yield for just 1 second. Is there a staff person here for this item? Oh, okay. Got you. You can both come if you want.
Some high-level questions here. I just wanted to get your sense of what are the upsides and downsides of hybrid police patrol vehicles? What kind of cost savings are there? And then do we have infrastructure, including maintenance infrastructure that's currently available, or do we need additional types of infrastructure for maintenance of these kinds of vehicles?
Sure, thank you. Councilman Riss, my name's Michael Boyd, Fleet Maintenance. So currently we're running Charger police vehicles for a vast majority of these replacements. These are direct replacements. On these vehicles, we've in the past switched, we're running V6 gasoline engines. These are all hybrid engines on these, if you mentioned. With that, one real benefit is while the police are doing their work, whether it's on the computer as they enter or look at data or feeds coming in or whatever, or they're at a scene running lights, these vehicles for a while will run strictly off the battery of the car. When the charge gets to a low point, it then allows, the car will crank up, use the alternator, charge the batteries, whatever, to re-energize to make sure those lights or whatever stay current or stay on all the time. With the current cars, they just have to idle all the time, although it's a V6 and it may be running only on 3 cylinders for a while. This is, it's gas during that time. So that's really your biggest savings. There are some new technologies as they stop at stoplights, on-off technology and stuff like that. But there's not a quantifiable thing right now because window sticker only says window sticker, real world is more real world, but we think that's where a lot of those savings are going to come.
Okay, and then just the last part, in terms of the infrastructure available, particularly maintenance infrastructure, is that something that we're going to need more of? Do we have a lot of that already?
Our staff is well-staffed and has been working on hybrid vehicles. We've moved toward hybrid over the years in many places, as many as we could in the city. And so we're well-staffed and well-capable of working on anything hybrid that we got.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you, Councilmember. Colleagues, anyone else on this item? All right, we'll move on to item 13. Councilmember Cook, I'll yield to you.
Hi, I actually just wanted you to give a quick synopsis because I think that this is something that's been coming up for, I know I've been getting, and I imagine some of my colleagues too have been getting direct responses to this. If you could just explain why this is on our agenda this close to when we've just done an increase in salaries and what it is meant to address, that would just be helpful. Thank you.
Certainly. Jim Roundgruber, Assistant Director of Human Resources. Let's see, where to begin? So you're all well aware we did the class and comp study and adopted all that back in June. And at that time, we indicated that we would be also looking at, especially in police and fire, the effects of any bypassing that took place. So a lot of moving parts up until the original pay plan was adopted in June. And once that, all those kind of moving parts settled and we were able to start analysis on that bypassing piece, that's what we started doing. And as we analyzed the effects or what we were discovering was basically a pattern. So we were noticing that the people who were bypassed happened to be, they were, the relationship was the same regardless. It was, in fire, it was people 3 steps above in the firefighter level than the fire driver level that had bypassed. And in police, it was similar. It's a little more complicated because it was higher in the ranks, but we saw patterns there. And so a pattern indicated a structure issue as opposed to just kind of random happenings or, effects of the adoption of the plan. So the structure, we determined that, these minor changes to the structure. So, minor change to the fire driver, fire was a little more simple than police with that. We were able to propose one minor change to the fire driver pay grade and a 0.7% increase that would basically take those who had been bypassed and put them back ahead of those who had bypassed them. The reason that we're coming back before council is because this is a requirement that council approves the pay structure. So this wasn't something we could just do administratively and say, oh, we're good, we're done. And this was what we determined to be sort of the most responsible step to take to do this. It wasn't, our first, we weren't like, oh, great, let's go back to council with this. It's going to be exciting. So, but we did feel like it was the responsible thing to do. So that's why we're back here before you today.
Fun.
Oh, I know you are. It's
I think this is fun.
this side's interesting. I can just say that. So.
Thank you for that summary. So, and I think this is important for folks to realize that it took implementing the plan to see where the issues were. And once they were identified, it's come up pretty immediately. I mean, we've only been in that new plan for a few months. And it's possible that we might need to make adjustments in the future if we see other patterns that arise as people fill positions or don't fill positions. We can't assume that we know all of the different patterns because we don't know who really warm bodies are in all of those places. So
I will say it is highly unlikely we'll be back before you requesting more structure changes, but yes, there are other ongoing issues that could be handled administratively.
great, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Riss, please.
Thank you, Member Pro Tem. Yeah, thanks, Mr. Ryan Gruber and staff for doing the hard work of sort of addressing these bypassing issues. I just have one question, and that is, will this be back paid to July, or what's the sort of like the start date of this?
So the proposed start date is the 11th of January, and there are reasons that we propose not doing the backdating, including administratively, it's very challenging. We have 196 employees affected by this action, and it would require, for example, going back through each of their actions through that period and through their overtime. It would take a lot of effort administratively for to make that happen, and it would also require. There's been business has been happening since then too, so actions have been taken under the current pay structure. And if you're making something retroactive, you kind of have to go back and look at those actions and make sure that things were in within policy within that. So it's administratively, it's a lot cleaner. I'll say that.
I guess I'd like to ask more about that. So first of all, so do we have a sense of what this would cost to do the back pay? Is this a major expense or fairly modest?
It would start, again, it would take some time to calculate all of it because of the overtime involved and some of the halftime and the different types of pays that the public safety groups have. But the starting number would be around 95,000.
And that's for so 95,000 is the
just
cost.
The base like salary. Yep. If there were no other overtime.
But that's the cost from the date you're suggesting, January till the end of the fiscal year.
That's the additional cost to take it from what we're proposing. So it would be, I think it was around 188,000, something like that for the full year.
And so you're proposing essentially half of that.
Roughly half of that, yes.
I mean, manager. I'm sorry, Con.
Well, yeah.
So one of the things I did want to jump in, as we start to talk about numbers, we are certainly not in a position to recalculate numbers in the work session. But even the annualized amount that you're showing here, that annualized amount is a point forward and it is not recalculating what would have happened if this would have been effective July 1, both of those numbers could be significantly different because every time there's an adjustment to pay, then that adjustment has an effective date and anything that happens changes from that point on. So we do have an annualized rate, but Jim can back me up if he needs to.
That's right. Yeah, you're good.
That annualized rate is also being calculated from the January date forward. Would it be accurate?
Yes.
I guess, so I appreciate the extra effort it would take, the potential cost. I know from the presentation we had at the last work session on the budget, we're looking at a significant surplus in staffing costs at the end of this year, at least projected, right? It seems to me for folks who've been bypassed that to make them whole and actually going back to the beginning of the fiscal year would be the right thing to do. So, thank you.
So I would like to speak regarding the projections. So whenever you have a projection and that projection is for the first quarter, we are projecting 3 quarters out. So when the more we get into the budget season, the more accurate those projections become. In my conversations with budget staff, you get a snapshot, but we also are seeing our sales tax numbers not grow as quickly as we had anticipated them to grow in this fiscal year that we are in. So just because we see a surplus on a point in time, that does not mean it's going to persist throughout the fiscal year, even though we're projecting. I wanted to get that clear in this conversation.
Councilmember, have you exhausted your question? Sorry. Councilmember Caballero?
Yeah, this is just a question for staff. When we did the pay, I guess maybe it was, I don't know if it was 23 or 22, where we knew we were going to have to move fire and police mid-year, and we had allotted for that retroactive back. I know this is different because it's individuals, but we were able to figure it out. Is it because it was the whole, it was everyone? Does that make sense? And there would have been overtime included in that moment. So I don't understand how we were able to do it then, but not now. And I don't know if my question is clear, because I know this was like 2 budget cycles ago.
I think it was few more than 2 budget cycles before, but anytime we are anticipating making making an adjustment at a particular time in the budget season, then we're going to try to use the information we have in front of us to anticipate what that is going to cost, and we're going to put it in the budget cycle that we're in. When we're talking about bypassing, we did not know what the amount was going to be because we had to wait till we implement it in order to determine, what that estimate might be. So there was not budget allocation considered for the bypassing adjustment in the current budget. In the year that you're speaking of, we considered it and we built it into our projections when we developed the budget.
Okay.
Thank
I'll
you.
come to you in a minute, Councilmember.
Sorry, I just had a couple, and I completely understand that, but everyone was aware that that was going to potentially be an issue, right? That was a conversation that we had, and it's not a lot. I guess I would say I'm in agreement with Councilmember Rist. I would like to see some investigation. And if there's a possibility of maybe it isn't overtime, it's just base pay, but I do feel like it seems unfair to me. So I will just state that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Freeman.
Thank you. And just starting from that point, I think I agree. And I'm just wondering if what you're saying is that it would make it simpler to even hold till the end of the year to see what the numbers would be in order to go back to July.
I would like to respond to that because what I would like to put on the record is we work every day. Pay changes happen, promotions happen, all of that It's ongoing. So at any time that a decision is made for an implementation, then we have to, if we say, well, it doesn't, like the council member here has said, maybe we don't consider, we cannot consider overtime. If an employee's salary is established for a certain date, then we have to carry that salary through the actions that have happened for that employee. We can certainly calculate the number, but we have to calculate the number. It is not something that we swag or that we can just do in a few days, just like these numbers were calculated over a period of time. I'm not guessing exactly what the period of time would be, but it would not be between now and when the council meeting is going to occur. It would have to be referred back to the administration if we were directed to use another date other than the date that's in this item. Then we would have to have time to do that analysis.
And I would think it would probably behoove us to take the more time to do it correctly.
I just want to clarify, would we be able to go ahead and do those as of January with the numbers that we have set, and also ask for the numbers for the previous 6 months?
So any time that we make a change to an employee's pay and we make another decision that is retroactive, doesn't matter when we do it, all of the analysis has to be done for the affected individuals. So in this case, I believe the staff has said it's approximately 200 employees, and a lot of different things have happened in, those 200 employees' pay, during a time frame. So I'm just really, really trying to be clear that whenever we're talking about setting a salary and going forward, we can easily estimate what that is going to be because it's going forward. When we start talking about making it retroactive, then you have to start with the retroactive date and move it up to whatever date that we're talking about. So if we made an adjustment at this point in time going forward, and you wanted us to look at what would have happened if those employees would have gotten that adjustment on July 1, you're going to still have to look at everyone who is similarly situated. So you still have to analyze again. There's no shortcut to analyzing.
I understand that. I want to make sure that there is a world in which we leave today and the folks go ahead and see that they will have their increase starting in January. They do not have to wait for when what we just heard was going to be pretty burdensome work to figure out all 196 of their back pay and all of the numbers that go along with that. I just want to make sure that they are being addressed immediately as quickly as we can, that starting date in January, and also that we could, in addition to that, look at the retroactive pay. I just want to make sure both and could happen.
Yeah. So what we do, what you are looking at is a structure change. It is not a change that, while it does, there are very specific people who have been impacted for this structure change because they happen to be in the job on the date that we're making the change. That is why you can see the amount that has been calculated to actually implement the new structure. So if we did that, you don't necessarily have the same employees or the same conditions. If you, in the future, if you were to say we really, really want this to be retroactive, then we actually have to start with July 1 and redo the analysis. That's what we have to do. And you may see something very different than, well, it's not going to be very different, but it could be different than what you see. Not so, because it will be different because the amount would be different. And that's what we're looking at here, an amount. But we don't know what that amount would be.
Councilmember Freeman.
Thank you. And so the analysis is of the pay structure, not of the employee's salary. And so that's why I suggested that even if it took another cycle or two, it would be worth having a full analysis, because I do think that July 1 would be the appropriate time to start from. Understanding that it could take a lot of staff's time, if at all possible, to bring in a resource externally that does that on a regular basis that we've worked with, that might be a possibility as well.
So these are calculations that are not complex calculations, but they're calculations that have to be done correctly. So it doesn't need additional staff resource. What took the time was determining who was bypassed and why they were bypassed on a case-by-case basis. Because ultimately, the market is the market. So whenever we make adjustments to structures, we're deciding to move the structure above what the market is for reasons that are morale and other values that we have. We promised to you all that we would bring back a market study. That market study generated what it generated. Yes, it generated a larger increase for firefighters than for our drivers. I just use that as an example. And we knew that may cause some bypass, and we talked about it here. But whatever we move it to, it's going to be moving it, beyond what the study generated. But it is a structure adjustment.
And what we're talking about moving, is it whether it's 5%, 6%, like that 6.24, or like that type of analysis is the level that you're talking about, which
Yes.
can be very tricky.
Well, it is the numbers you see here, because once all of the pay adjustments were made, you can look at the employees that you have at that time and see exactly what happened with those employees. And that is why these percentages that you see in this agenda item, that's why you see the percentages, because those are the percentages that it actually took to move, so that you did not have it for a moment. You do not have bypassing for a set time frame. You do not have bypassing in the structure. But things are changing. It's not so much higher date. It has more to do with promotions and people leaving, bringing in new people. It has more to do with that than it's a snapshot.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Caballero.
Yeah, but you've already got the folks in a spreadsheet somewhere with a formula attached to it. So I don't understand, and I'm not saying it's not labor. I'm not negating that. What I'm saying is that if you've got a point in time from January 11 moving forward, you already know who got what, where, and when. That has already been done. So folks have resigned, you pull them out, right? You pull them out of your, you blank out that cell in that Excel spreadsheet, right? Like there's a formula, you figure that out, and you move the date. Instead of starting from January 11, your date is July 1. And again, I'm not saying it's not labor, but I think it would have been January 2022. So it would have been January 2022. So it would have been fiscal year 22-23, where we did the mid-rate market adjustment for police and fire. And we did it back, and we were told in that budget, we're going to allot this money. And we did it back to July 1, because we knew that we were going to have to make those employees whole. And I'm not saying that example is exactly identical. What I'm saying is that would have been for the entire group, which means more individuals. So I guess what I'm saying is I trust staff to be able to do that analysis. I don't have an opinion on, do we do it? What Councilmember Cook is suggesting, I don't really have an opinion on that. I just find it, I guess what I'm saying is it doesn't seem like that it's not information that can be gotten. That's all. Thank you.
It's certainly information that can be gotten.
Absolutely.
It certainly can be gotten. It is known of the employees, I think you said 196 employees, most of are in police. It is known exactly who was bypassed when the analysis was done. And the part of this that has not been done is if the effective date of that was back to July 1, then the retroactive adjustments would be based upon if they gotten overtime or other promotions. So you have to do all of those calculations and then determine if there's bypassing.
Thank you. And I guess, and this is just me, understanding that overtime would make it more complex. I am okay with it just being base pay.
We cannot do that.
We can't tease that out?
We cannot do
Okay.
that, no.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, colleagues.
So actually, what we're talking about here is a dollar figure that we do not have in front of us today, and the time that it would take to redo the calculations. That's really all that we're talking about. If you all give us direction to do it a different way, then we would take the item back and make those calculations so you see what it is that you are approving, and you can see what impact it may or may not have on the current year's budget, because that's all the money that we actually have.
Councilman Freeman, did you have something else?
I think the city manager made the suggestion, and I'm okay if we do send it back and allow staff to figure out what the calculation difference would be, along with the dollar amount.
Councilmember Baker? Right. I'm sorry, were you done? I'm sorry. Colleagues, anyone else?
Madam Manager, I'm listening.
Thank you. Madam Manager, I've been listening to the conversation. I guess from a parliamentary point of view, we don't vote, but we can certainly poll the House and get a sense of my colleagues. I think we may have crossed a 4-person threshold to send this back to staff. So I'll just poll the House. Are there 4 folk who want to, based upon our conversation? All right, does staff have a clear understanding of what the council is asking for?
Yes.
All right, would you state that for the record, what we're
Yes.
asking for? All right.
Yeah, so we have a request now to go back and recalculate as if the adjustments were effective July 1st, 2024.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so item 13 is being sent back. All right. All right, thank you, colleagues. We'll move on now to item 14. Councilmember Cook, I'll yield to you.
Do we have a?
I think they're coming up.
Frederick Raven, Chief Data Officer with Technology Solutions and Assistant Director. Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem Middleton, City Council, and City Manager Page.
Like speaking into this mic. Okay. I have a few questions about the sort of impact of this contract. So, where to start? So this is part of a larger amount of money that has already been granted to Hayti Promise. Oh, I'm on the wrong thing, apparently, sorry.
No, you are not. We are.
Okay, I was wondering about that, but I was like, if he wants to answer those questions, that's cool. But it was nice to meet you, Mr. Raven, thank you. Okay, way more sense. Hi, good to see you. I was like, oh, I don't know that person. Okay, great. Yes, so this is part of an amount of money that has already been granted to Hayti Promise. Can you talk about where this money particularly is coming from out of that 10 mil grant that we already did. And then I want to talk more specifically about some of the goals that are listed in the partnership objectives, particularly around assisting property owners in maintaining and improving their property and how this supports that. So if you could just talk about the grant, where this money is coming from, and then we can move into those goals.
Good afternoon, Council. Summer Alston, Project Manager, Fayetteville Street Corridor Improvements Project. The first question I think is straightforward, assuming I understand you. It is coming out of the revenue replacement portion of the 2 grants that were made to Hayti Promise.
That $10 million was broken down though, isn't that correct?
It was in 2, it was
Just into 2 pieces?
it was just in the 2 pieces, yes, ma'am.
Okay, and what were the amounts of those 2?
Oh, you're going.
Okay, sorry, 2,
Roughly
Yes.
2.7 and roughly 6.3,
okay.
give or take.
If you
And I
can suspend
can't,
for a moment, the manager wants to interject something, then
great.
council member, you can pick back up.
I'm sorry. So I did hear you talk about the split between the revenue replacement and the regular ARPA, but I thought that what you really were asking was sort of the breakdown of the 10 million overall in the different categories, more so. Just an estimate.
in the categories from the work plan,
Yes, the categories from the like residential, commercial, infrastructure, just in
Okay.
general. Yeah.
okay, so if you will allow me the moment of the technology, because I don't keep those figures top of mind, and the laptop doesn't like this.
Yeah, take your time.
Okay, so the work plan, as approved, lists commercial real estate and business development at 2.7. And it has some organizational development at about $250,000. And then in the second portion, there is residential real estate improvements at about 4. And placekeeping at about 2. And I am reading directly from the approved work plan.
And this would be coming out of the residential real estate for,
It would be coming out of the revenue replacement portion in the tranche that is currently labeled residential real estate improvements. But I mean, there's blending in there because we're not exclusively residential in the corridor at any given point, but generally speaking.
right. And so this contract, the structures that would be stabilized as a part of this contract would be potentially commercial and residential.
As it's scoped right now, that is correct.
Okay. And then this partnership objective that's listed here, assist long-term or legacy property owners to maintain and improve their real property assets and the surrounding neighborhood built environment by utilizing multiple resources, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Can you just explain for folks who are watching at home what this does and how it affects that goal?
So if you drill down to certain segments of the core territory, we are fortunate to have what we loosely refer to as legacy property owners who either they or their family have owned these assets for, in some cases, decades. That's not, of course, everybody. But in this case, because we do have that clustering, which I think we're fortunate to have, it just is another way of lifting up in the way that OEWD typically does, the fact that this is a historic corridor with folks that have been in place for a long period of time. Obviously, we can't discriminate, but I think we put in a threshold of roughly 7 years just as a legal marker. So one is more emotionally driven, one is less systematic, and one is the actual, legal marker that we suggested of 7 years.
So this is going to be, when we talk about stabilization, or can you just explain what stabilization would mean?
In this context, what stabilization means is the structure is no longer eroding. It is no longer posing a public health hazard.
So these have already been identified properties that are posing a health hazard or in some way,
Yes, and.
yes, and.
Yes, and.
Okay, and so this is a list of ones, all the properties already identified?
The basis for this is an existing backlog of code enforcement cases that NIS has to maintain.
Okay.
That's the baseline.
Okay,
But we are not at this stage suggesting that it would be exclusively the existing list because they're always,
Adding.
working through their process and identifying things. And so we did not want to say it had to be this list as of this day, but it is predicated upon that list.
okay, thank you for that, it's helpful. Do we have an average cost of the stabilization?
We have very, very rough numbers because
Okay.
we don't have a contractor yet that
Yeah.
can go and do the analysis. But based on the analysis that the team in NIS has been able to do, and they, can speak to it better than I, because code enforcement does this every day. The numbers that the NIS interim director most recently spoke about were in the range of 20 to 70 or 20 to 80 were where the existing data led her.
Okay, and so just as I know what this is because I do this stuff and also I get to come watch the Housing Appeals Board do their thing, but just so folks understand, when we're talking about this maintenance, we're only talking about code enforcement structural things. So there are other parts of bringing properties into, not necessarily into compliance, but into like some sort of usable space that's
Yes.
not included in this number. So can you just talk about the differences, what we're doing and what is going to be left to the property owners to supplement?
Well, it'll be a case-by-case basis based on the condition of the structure. But as the plan is outlined in overview form, it does indicate, as do most of the programs that NIS operates, that not every single thing that might need to be done is guaranteed to be done because we are still in a position of having to comply with our federal guidelines and even just local guidelines and precedents. So yes, it does clearly state not every possible repair will be made. And the goal specifically here is to eliminate as many code violations as possible.
And this might be a better question I would just love to hear from NIS about the correspondence that goes on with the property owners. I think it would just be helpful to hear. I know that it happens, but I think it would just be helpful to hear what that looks like, what your interactions have been with the property owners. And I know it's going to differ, of course, because some of these cases have been open for quite some time and maybe some of them are newer, but just what your normal procedures are and how that looks.
Oh, definitely. Good afternoon, Clarence Harris, Neighborhood Improvement Services, Housing Code Administrator, Acting Assistant Director. So as Summer shared with us, these are majority upwards of 20 plus properties along that major corridor area that have code enforcement violations. During our process of citing these properties, we do reach out to these property owners, making them aware of the conditions. In some cases, the owners do have intentions on remediating the properties, but not necessarily having the funds to actually implement such. So this program will allow us to move forward with both assisting and correcting code enforcement violations. So in most cases, we'll enter into what we call a compliance agreement, which is a memorandum of understanding, allowing the homeowners or the property owners additional time to bring the property into compliance.
And out of the 20 or so, you said that there were some homeowner or property owners that were working with you. Have we talked to most of them? Are we able to identify owners for all of those properties?
Unfortunately, we haven't been able to identify owners for all of the properties. It is challenging. Some of the property owners are out of state. Unfortunately, we can't find a good contact information for them. But the ones that are local, we do work and communicate with them to share our perspective on the violations and try to have conversations around the remediation.
I think those are all my questions.
Thank you, Councilmember. Colleagues, Councilmember Rist.
Thank you, Councilmember Cook, for those questions. If I could just kind of proceed on that. So as I understand from the memo, it says the services provided will include, let me pull this up here. Include a combination of owner education, technical assistance, coalition building, and direct support to quickly address poor conditions. So that direct support would include actually doing the construction to address the code violations. Is that correct?
Yes, it consists of consulting as it relates to how to bring the property into compliance. I'll let Summer speak a little bit more.
You are. He's exactly correct. You're exactly correct.
And so, thank you, Ms. Olson. So then the further question is, so that you mentioned Mr. Harris's compliance agreement. What's the legal basis then of this sort of relationship? Is that just a compliance agreement? Or are we talking, is there like a lien put on the property? What's the sort of actual legal kind of foundations of this transaction, this relationship with the property owners?
Definitely. So like, as it relates to our ordinance for the housing code or non-residential code, staff is given the opportunity to provide an additional time for the owners to bring a property into compliance. There is no lien attached to the property because there is no self-help remedy or any repairs implemented at this time. If in any case, Neighborhood Improvement Services take a property before the Housing Appeals Board, gain an ordinance for repair, once that contract services and repairs are implemented for the work that's been performed in labor and materials, at that time a lien and invoice will be placed on the property.
Okay, I thought repairs would also be considered as part of this grant that we're approving.
Mm-hmm.
It does not include repairs as well?
Yes, that does include.
So if repairs were undertaken.
Correct, if repairs are undertaken.
Then a lien would be then placed on the property.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Freeman?
Are those repairs being done by the grant or by the city? Because it shouldn't be a lien if it's done with a grant.
It's a yes and again.
Okay.
Because in order for this trilateral agreement to work, the city's authority has to be retained. And so through and by this action, there is actually putting grant money into this partnership and attaching it back to NIS so that that lien authority is retained and goes forward in the process as if it was general fund dollars.
Okay. And are there any private dollars going towards this at all?
If they can be raised,
Okay.
certainly.
Thank you, Councilman. Colleagues, anyone else? Finally, thank you so much. I'm really excited about this contract. I have, over the years, watched millions of dollars go out of the city to all kinds of neighborhoods and all kinds of initiatives, which I've gladly voted for with far less scrutiny. And I can list off things. I'm proud of the money we send to eviction diversion. I'm proud of the money we spend on protected bike lanes. I'm proud of the money we spend on tree planting around the city. The animating proposition behind all of this was a realization of the reason why some of those properties are in their condition is because of 147 destroyed that neighborhood and because of historic disinvestment. We can draw a causal line between some of the lack commercially and privately. The descendants of the ancestors who are no longer here, that corridor, still live there. This is actually one of the neighborhoods where Black folk are still there. You look at Walltown and other areas, but where a significant amount are still there. And the animating proposition behind this was to, in a very concrete and substantive way, address some of the historical that we can point to scientifically and empirically that led to some of the disrepair in the area. So I'm very excited. Listen, I'm excited when we can help low-income folk who are long-term residents help pay their taxes. It's the same principle of helping those folk in ways that we can, and we've come up with a way that we can legally do it and morally also do it as well. So, and I know that all of the due diligence, more due diligence in this area than any other area will be imposed. There's a whole CDC being stood up to do the work, which other neighborhoods haven't had to do that. whether they're doing NPOs or whatever, but I'm excited about the work. I'm excited about the flow of money. I think Councilmember Freeman raised an interesting point that private money is welcome. It's going to take a whole lot of money to address what's happened in that neighborhood historically. $10 million is a drop in the bucket, but I'm glad to see finally that money is starting to move. Because before we can even get to some of the bigger dreams in the area, we do literally have to stabilize that neighborhood to make some of those structures safe, to turn them from dens of illicit activity and unsafe structures where our children are playing in there and things are happening. So thank you so much for this work. I'm excited about this contract, and I know we will continue to. It's a lot of money, I know, but we spend a lot of money on a whole lot of other things over the years in this city. So I'm excited about the contract. Summer, please.
Mayor Pro Tem, if I may, I just want to take one moment because I don't get this, I won't get this opportunity again, I don't think. I want to thank the NIS team because they have been the best partners as we've been trying to figure this out. I'd also like to thank Deputy City Manager Chadwell and Manager Page because they have been stalwarts in helping us figure out some complexities and helping us be brave in how we structure things. And it is a privilege. And without NIS, we wouldn't be here. So I wanted to acknowledge those things. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I'm glad they can smell their flowers now. NIS, when code enforcement usually shows up, they usually show up with a bill and a list of things to do. But for them to be showing up with checks, actually, I think is a refreshing change from what they've historically been known for. So thank you so much for the work. Thank you, colleagues. We'll move now to item number 16, I believe. Sure, I'm sorry.
They're gone.
Director Austin. Just a question. I noticed I was trying to locate where the 7 years was in the document. I cannot find that. Is that information else? Like, am I missing it?
I will find it for you, council member, but it's a placeholder. It's not written in stone and it's not tied to a specific legal precedent. It's anticipatory, but I believe it's in the plan document.
Okay.
And if I'm wrong, I apologize.
That's okay. I'll find the plan.
That's what's been discussed
I'll find the
in
plan. I'm
the
good.
program team.
Thank you, Councilmember. Thank you so much.
I apologize.
No, thank you. We'll move now to item 16. I believe Councilmember Baker and Riss pulled it at the same time, almost. So I'll yield to either one of you. Item number 16.
Thanks for coming up.
Thank you.
Part of this is just my interest in the City Broadband Initiative and learning a little bit more about that and how this ties into that. And also just understanding this context, because I know it goes back to 2017 and there's been a lot of work, and I just want to understand all of that because that's part of this contract amendment. My understanding, so Duke established their own network, the Triangle Fiber Project, in partnership with MCNC. They reached out to the city. So there's a 2017 contract for the fiber optic cable, and that was to go to city-owned sites. There's $4.2 million. The city needed bandwidth for city facilities. Then there was a scope amendment in 2021 to serve DHA properties. That was a $750,000 contract amendment. Now there's the underground rock issue which is the 1.4 million amendment. So isn't that broadly the correct understanding of the timeline? What else am I missing there? And is there any other background and overview of the project?
I think you accurately portrayed it. This has been an ongoing process since 2017 was when I got the call from my director, Carrie Good. We sat in the office because the city management's office had a proposition they thought would be favorable to the city, and it was to work with both Duke, the city, and the county. So there was a cost-sharing model that was actually baked into that. So you fast forward a year, we're working on a plan to be able to submit it to council. Then you fast forward a little bit more, and we actually are dealing with the pandemic. So that's when we pivoted and we used some of the ARPA funds to prioritize making sure connectivity was made available to the Durham Housing Authority, certain units there, because at that time there was a gap in making sure that our kids within the community had access to the internet. So we prioritized that. We made sure we had some of those funds go towards there, and the thought was to still come home, bring it right back to the city. And that is where we're at now because we need the additional allocation. While we may have the funds, we need that additional allocation from City Council to approve being able to spend this amount because it's gone over our authority. And again, that authority has exceeded because it's surpassed the original projections. As many of you all know, construction in Durham can be fairly difficult at times, especially when you encounter rock. And that has been one of the driving forces, the cost of rock throughout Durham. So that has kind of, in certain areas, blown the budget, especially when you're talking about miles and miles of construction that you're having to account for.
Can you just help me understand the motivation behind choosing this route of working with Duke, and also what kind of cost savings are there? Substantial cost savings to this working with Duke and MCNC on the fiber optic cable versus other options, Google Fiber or something like that?
City Manager Page.
Oh, sorry.
So I did, Frederick is doing a wonderful job, but I did want to jump in just to say I was part of the initial discussions with Duke. I wasn't the city manager, but I was in the city manager's office. And the original proposal was actually very interesting to the city because we did not have to build the ring. We did not have to build the fiber ring. Duke is building that with all of their funds, and they also provided the city with dark fiber at no cost to the city for the ring. All of our costs, which we have had to be really, really, careful about making sure that we are paying our share, is for the last mile implementation. So if we would have had to actually build the whole thing, then it would have been extremely more costly to do this type of implementation. What I heard you say is why we are building out or being a partner to having our own municipal area network and not buying fiber from other providers. And here I'll be a little careful. First of all, the other providers that you mentioned doesn't have that, they don't have that type of presence or did not have it, certainly didn't have it then in 17. One of the other providers does go everywhere, and we do buy, services from them, but they were not interested in doing a robust capital improvement to permit gigabit fiber to locations that we need gigabit fiber just to do our jobs. They had cable, and they could make special provisions to provide some high speed, but not gigabit service. And then there was another competitor that came in the market providing gigabit service, but it was decided at the time to partner and take advantage of another community partner building the whole fiber ring, as well as giving us certain strands of dark fiber to connect to.
So how does this compare to something like what's in Wilson, North Carolina with I think it's called like Greenlight or Greenlit? And that's like community owned. It was the first one, North Carolina.
I'll speak to that. So I'm very familiar with Greenlight. I actually, my father has Greenlight in the city of Wilson. I'll start with, legislative action that, prohibited local governments from actually building and selling internet service after the city of Wilson. So after the city of Wilson, and I can't remember the other community, there was one other community that had done that. So that is what Greenlight is. It sells, it used public funding to build out a network. It's a much smaller community. And then they were able to sell that as in competition with the providers, some of which you've mentioned in your comments here. So our municipal area network is not intended to be sold to anyone. It is for the benefit of governmental facilities and the inclusion of the housing authority for our own purposes to provide, high-speed network internet services to the facilities that we have to serve.
That's extremely helpful. Thank you. And so we're making these big upfront costs, payments, and we're going to see long-term savings because of that, right? Because we're not buying a service. We own the fiber, and so we just have to pay for maintenance and that kind of thing. Is that correct understanding?
Frederick, that's correct.
That's correct. That is correct. And if I could add just another benefit of being able to have this type of network that we're talking about, I believe it was on Monday, which was the second, where you all voted on the digital equity interlocal agreement. And that was with the partnership between the city and the county on how we're going to kind of work together on that. There was roughly $750,000 that was allocated towards that. And one of the things that we proposed and that the county agreed upon was being able to leverage this network once it stands up to be able to provide Wi-Fi, high-speed internet access to a lot of our Durham Parks and Rec sites. So we work with Parks and Rec and to be able to identify like what were the top 10 to 12 sites that they thought would be the most impactful locations to be able to have that high-speed internet open to the public, because we're really looking at that digital inclusion process and making sure that we could address that digital divide. So access is one of the ways. Like you have to have access to the device, but if you have the device without internet, it can be a rock to an extent. So we want to make sure that they are able to access this high-speed internet in addition to some of the other benefits that we're trying to bring into the community.
Okay, so and we can't sell because of the legislation that happened after Wilson was so successful. But we can use it ourselves. The county can use it. Well, what about the schools? The school system?
So at this time for the cities, it's only for the city facilities.
Mm-hmm.
Your mic's not on, Councilman.
But that wouldn't be prohibited to serve public facilities, right? The county facilities, city facilities, and public schools.
So,
or should we have this conversation another time?
So anytime we have a partner that is a local government, and as Frederick has mentioned in his speaking here, it was Durham County who has libraries and other facilities. They also are a part or were a part of the agreement with Municipal Area Network, where everyone that was a partner was paying for their own infrastructure investments. And so I'm not certain if the schools were included in the county's facilities or not, but I know libraries were, and I'm not really certain. But they decided the buildings that they wanted to be. And I do want to say that the network was primarily designed with all of us at the table, but Duke's portion of it, they had to have facilities in the vicinity because they were building the overall fiber ring. So it wasn't, Durham is pretty big. So, if you actually have public schools that are not nearby, Duke facilities, then you're going to be too far away to build a last mile. So the county and the city and Duke were the primary partners when the original design was made.
Okay, and then I'm coming to the end here. The ownership is, we own the fiber, but Duke and MCNC also own the fiber?
So I actually have my director, Kerry Good. He's actually online as well. And this is getting a little bit more into that architecture piece.
Okay.
Kerry, are you able to chime in on that question?
Yes, thank you, Frederick. We own the spare fiber to the facilities from the backbone. And it's in separate conduit, segregated from Duke fiber. So yes, we own about 80% of the fiber infrastructure.
Okay, does that mean we have to pay additional services on top of what we own?
No, that's the beautiful part. Only maintenance is when a fiber is cut.
Okay.
Then we have to repair it. And we have contracted with Duke to do the repairs on cuts on the fiber. Other than that, it gives a good payback because the maintenance on the fiber is very low, and we should get a good return on investment the longer we run on that fiber.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Riss.
Just a couple follow-up questions. So first of all, thanks, City Manager. I know you've worked on this for a long time. Thank you for working on this, Mr. Raven, as well, and your team for working on this. I appreciate the connection to the DHA properties as well. And is that city expense or DHA expense?
So connection to the inclusion of DHA properties it is, I would say it's a city expense. The Housing Authority does have responsibility as it relates to the implementation. We used CARES Act funding to facilitate the connection for DPS and to prioritize them to come online quicker. And that funding overall was, I believe it was near $2 million. But the ongoing infrastructure investment is going to be part of the city's responsibility.
Well, yeah, on behalf of the DHA board, I really appreciate the city's investment. This is the big investment in our public housing community, so I appreciate that. I just want to say, I think this is obviously it's complicated, but I think this is an amazing partnership. There's been a lot of talk recently about the relationship between the city and Duke University. I don't want to relitigate that conversation here, but I just want to say in this case, this is a very powerful partnership that leverages Duke's sort of position as well as the city's needs, and I think I really appreciate the work we've done to form that partnership, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, colleagues, so much. Thank you. Good to see you, man. All right, we'll move to item number 19. Councilmember Cook, I'll yield to you.
Just want to make sure I'm looking at the right one.
While we wait, Sean Egan, Director of Transportation for the city. Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem and members of council.
Yes, sir.
Your time, see if it's a bus or
it?
a train or.
What is it?
Santa Claus.
Oh. Right.
I was gonna say, I like your jacket.
Twinsies.
Councilmember Cook, if you're still looking, I had a question.
Please go ahead. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, Sean, thank you for being with us. So the $7,000 roughly is for translation. Was this not factored in from what is this for?
So we were really focused when we were scoping the contract on making sure that we had interpretation and translation services available for all of the engagement activities throughout the course of the project. But one of the key deliverables from the project is the final report. And then making sure that we have both the detailed final report and an executive summary of the final report. We neglected to include the translation costs of those final deliverable documents in the original scope. So we're going back now and requesting additional funding and contract authorization so that those final report materials, the full report and then the executive summary of the report are available in both English and Spanish.
So would you subcontract those translation services out from that $7,000 or?
So the vendor will contract out those services. They're already using a translation and interpretation staff for all the materials that have been used for public engagement have been translated. So I think they'd be using the same firm that they've been using.
So would it, and then I'll yield to Councilmember Cook. So is it a fair characterization to say that we just overlooked that when we're finished?
It was an
and have to
oversight.
report this stuff out that we.
It was a mistake. I apologize.
$7,000 mistake. Councilmember Cook.
We were able to get funding, so 80% of the funding will be covered by federal funds.
Got you. Councilmember?
Yeah, so I was actually gonna pull this in tangent with 18, which has been referred back, but I'm just curious now that we have this deliverable and we've also shifted our occupancy tax to Discover Durham. And one of the projects that they've been looking at is this cap, which the study is sort of also touching on. I'm wondering how this information gets handed off, what that process is going to look like. This might be too much for this item, and feel free to tell me if it is.
I can give kind of a high-level overview. We are not at the point where we have a final report. We are not at the final phase of the project yet. So we are concluding the engagement phase where we've been working across the community to understand the values and the goals of community members for what reconnecting across this corridor would look like. The next phase of the project that we'll be doing over the next 6 months is taking all of that input that we've gotten from stakeholders and across the community and then developing a set of alternatives. So one of those alternatives could be a freeway cap, for example. And then what we'll be doing is we'll be providing some context and narrative about to what extent the alternative addresses or does not address the goals that were articulated by community members throughout the engagement process. And the kind of end product would be a presentation to City Council of those alternatives for your consideration and to get direction from the council on how to proceed with the alternatives presented, as well as the context of what we heard throughout the project.
Yeah, I guess I'm just looking at this in particular because I know this is one of the things that the occupancy tax that we have now moved to Discover Durham can be used to do, which is specifically engagement and stakeholder discussions. So I'm just trying to think about this as that transition happens. And obviously I know this money is already obligated, so we're going to continue doing that and getting a final presentation. Just thinking ahead of what that will look like because it's going to come to us and kind of right at the same time that money and power is going to be moving outside of our control at the council. So anyway, I appreciate that. I just wanted to have that brief conversation. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Rist.
Yeah, just one, thank you, Mr. Egan. Just one process question. Since 18 now is now referred back, does that does impact 19 because that's connected to 18, right?
We think that we can reconfigure our approach and still maintain the schedule that's been outlined for all of the technical work in the project. So we're developing a revised approach, but we want to maintain and we're confident that we can maintain the same schedule.
I guess I understand. I guess I'm wondering, isn't 19 the agreement with WSP contingent on the continued engagement with idealisms, right? So don't the two, aren't they linked together? And so if we have one on the consent agenda that we're approving and the other sort of like going back for review, does that make sense?
We have some engagement, for example, is scoped in the WSP contract. We have the ability to do engagement with city staff. So there are a number of ways that we can address the engagement needs of the project.
So you're saying there's still a need for this regardless of what happens with the contract that's now going back to staff?
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilmember. I would point out also that we do already have data that we can report out on. I mean, we're not going to stop engagement, but even if we did, say theoretically today, there's a whole bunch of stuff still to report out on because engagement's been going on. Would still need to be translated. It would still be, so colleagues, anything else? Madam Manager, I'm going to request that this be put on okay, I'll get to you. I'm going to request that this be placed on GBA. Item 19. All right, Councilmember Freeman.
I just wanted to follow up on Councilmember Cook's question. Is there a process that's going to be in place to ensure that, I guess, somehow these transportation projects, that engagement piece does end up with Discover Durham? Or do we need to have a conversation about that?
That's not part of our work plan. We've done some outreach and engagement with Discover Durham, but we're planning on using our resources and our staff to complete the alternatives portion for over the next 6 to 7 months. And so we'll be looking forward to getting direction from the council once that process is complete, once we've presented alternatives on next steps. So I think that would be the time to look at those types of next steps decisions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, colleagues, for a great discussion. I think it's also worth noting that there's a qualitative difference between types of engagement we've done. Discover Durham's engagement, while it certainly can touch on issues of equity, has an eye towards profitability, revenue generation, tourism. But when we need to do engagement in terms of addressing historic inequities, we'll always be able to do that. Even if with the rerouting of tax money to Discover Durham, there's a strategic kind of framework for that in terms of long-term building up our revenue from tourism. But we will never sell ourselves short in terms of when we need to do community engagement, whether it's the Beltline or whether it's anything else. We have always provided for mechanisms outside of Discover Durham's wheelhouse to do the type of engagement. And my suspicion is we will continue to do that because of our commitment to equity as a city, as a core value of our city. So I appreciate the vigilance about that, but I think it's important for folk listening to know that that's not where all our eggs are with Discover Durham in terms of community engagement when we need to do things in the city. Sure, absolutely.
And I don't have any direct connection to Discover Durham. Do they not have a equity lens focus as well?
Absolutely.
Just making sure that.
No, absolutely. No, absolutely. Everybody connected to Durham does. I'm just simply saying that that's not our only tentacle to do community engagement. And when Discover Durham does it, right, with the 4 point, and when Discover Durham does it, there's always an eye towards tourism and stuff, whereas sometimes we need to just fix folk, whether tourists come or not. And that's oftentimes a different type of engagement, but I appreciate the vigilance of this council on it. Thank you so much. Good to see you, Sean. Appreciate you. Oh, item number 20. All right. Stay right there. Councilmember Baker, I'll yield to you.
All right, thank you. Can you just speak to the 2 CIP changes? The first one being the access maintenance facility, changing project ownership from Go Triangle to City of Durham. And the second one being this Small Starts Grant project for the viability of bus rapid transit. Really interested in that. I think that's, in addition to keeping buses free, one of the most important things that we can be thinking about transportation wise in the city. So,
Sure. So just to give a little bit of background, in around 2020, the Durham County Transit Plan was looking at regional transit maintenance facilities and fleet needs, trying to identify if there were opportunities to coordinate or consolidate facilities. And so at that point, Go Triangle was leading that study effort to look across Chapel Hill, Durham, Cary, Raleigh, across everyone's facilities and needs. At that time, one of the key needs that was identified that we discussed, I think, last month was to relocate the access paratransit facility away from the current Fay Street site to a new site, and then to backfill the space that's currently used by access for the big buses, the fixed route buses. So because Go Triangle at that time was leading the study, the funding for the facility was added to that project. But as the project matured and it became clear that the city would be the project sponsor for acquiring the facility and then building the new access maintenance facility, the Durham County Transit Plan decided to essentially reallocate that 3.3 that had been previously set aside for future needs in the Go Triangle project and add it to a city project for the access maintenance facility. So what we're doing now, but that happened with the adoption of the FY25 work program. There was a prior balance of 3.3 million that was reassigned to the city. So what this CIP amendment does is it updates our financial records to recognize that 3.3 million has been made available by our partners in the Durham County Transit Plan. In addition to those are prior year balances, in addition to 1.7 million that was made available as new money in 25. So grand total that's available to us through the plan, and that will be shown in the project account is the 5 million with the adoption of this amendment. So that's the first one. And then the second one is, I think most folks know that there has been a BRT, Bus Rapid Transit project, the North-South project, in the works for over a decade in Chapel Hill. There are 4 North, South, East, and West projects, Bus Rapid Transit projects happening in Raleigh. And there's been a persistent question, when is Durham going to advance its first Bus Rapid Transit project? There is federal funding through the Federal Transit Administration for major Bus Rapid Transit projects. It is a very resource-intensive process to go through to apply for that funding. So typically the first step that is taken is for, if you think you have a project, you go through and you create, you look at all of the criteria, the scoring criteria that the federal government uses. You create kind of a mock report card. How do you think you would score before you even start the process, officially start the federal process? So that's what we propose to do over the next 6 months. And the corridor that we're looking at starts at the Village, at Holloway and Miami and East Durham. It proceeds along Holloway into downtown and serves Durham Station. That's our highest ridership corridor. And then they look at ridership and as well as employment density. So we'd be serving our downtown, which is a dense employment center, and then we'd be proceeding west out to Irwin Road to the Duke Hospital VA Medical Complex along Irwin Road, which is a dense employment center. So there's already 15-minute service across this entire corridor. And what we're seeing is an appetite for considerably more service and better service. So looking at what we can do to improve bus speed and reliability, travel times, higher quality transfer facilities, more service, and making this our first Bus Rapid Transit corridor in Durham. So the proposal that we presented to our partners was for $200,000 to do a feasibility study. Do we think that this corridor is worth committing additional resources to pursue the Federal Transit Administration process? And our partners in November approved that request. And so we're now updating the city CIP with this amendment to program that funding so that we can start that work.
Great, thank you for that. Again, I think it's so important, anything that we can do to help support that and any updates we can get as it's moving forward. I think it's, again, one of the most important pieces of the transportation puzzle that we can pursue with the dollars that are available. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Freeman. Councilmember Caballero, my bad. Yeah, I thought it is.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I'm really excited to see this item on here. I know there were several of us who worked throughout the fall, and I just really want to thank you and your team for your tenacity to make this happen. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Rist.
Thank you for the comments. Yeah, again, thanks to Ms. Regan and the staff. Also, we should say that the county's also involved in this, so we want to thank the county for their involvement as well. So yeah, this is a great partnership and it's really exciting. As Councilmember Baker said, this is a piece we gotta move towards. As you mentioned, Chapel Hill and Raleigh are ahead of us, so we need to catch up fast. So thank you.
Yeah, we got a unanimous vote of support from the Durham Board of County Commissioners, and we really appreciate their strong support for us to be able to advance this work. There's a lot of excitement that we've heard from the county, from our partners at Durham, Chapel Hill, Carrboro, MPO, and Go Triangle to support the city advancing this work. So we're really proud of the partnership.
Thank you, Councilman. Colleagues, anyone else? Mr. Director, good to see you, man. Thank you so much. Colleagues, before we settle, I'm going to circle back to the item that I said we would dispose of under other matters. So, Councilman Marissa, I'll yield to you on the bow hunting issue. You were
Yeah, just seeking, I guess, I don't know if it's a vote or a consensus among my colleagues, just to put this on a GBA at an upcoming meeting, just to have a vote up or down on the changes that I think Deputy City Manager Ferguson had initially drafted. We had some questions about it at a work session, so we've got feedback from the attorney. So I think we ought to put the revised ordinance on a meeting agenda so we can have an up-down vote on that.
I'm wondering if we should put it on a work session. I don't think we've had opportunity to treat it in a work session publicly since the.
I mean, I will say, so we did have the work session conversation. I think from the memo that we got from Attorney Miles, there's I don't think there was a whole lot of change that we could anticipate with, and maybe Attorney Rayburg, if you could help with that. I don't think there's any changes suggested to the changes that Bo Ferguson first presented in our original work session. There's no changes there. It's the same ordinance, right? Or same changes to the ordinance. Yeah. So.
Okay. I just want to.
But yeah, I'm happy if we want to bring it back to another.
Let me explain my rationale. I don't want to. I try not to determine what's substantive, and I just want to give council members an opportunity to treat it. But if you're comfortable with it going to, I'd prefer for it to appear back before us under regular order in a work session and then place it on. That would be December 19th, if we're good with that. All right, staff. So if we could bring it back to our December 19th work session, cool. Yeah. And it should be a short discussion. It sounds like if no substantive changes. Thank you so much for that. Thank you, ma'am. All right, with that, I think we're ready to settle the agenda, Madam Manager.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem and council members. For consent, I have items 1 through 12, items 14 through 17, and item 20. For GBA, I have item 19 and GBA public hearing, item 21.
I concur. All right, colleagues, you've heard the manager's report on settling the agenda. I'll entertain a motion to settle the agenda. I have a motion in a second. All in favor? Those opposed? All right, colleagues, thank you so much for a great meeting. It is December 5th, 2:47 p.m. We are adjourned. God bless Durham. Thank y'all.